After a flying visit earlier on in the year, the UFC has touched back down in London town, and it promises to be another electric night of fights at the O2 Arena. Tom Aspinall reprises his role as the headliner, and the likes of Meatball Molly McCann, Paddy Pimblett, and Paul Craig are once again back as the supporting cast. My name's Jack, this is Broken Orbital, and welcome to the preview show for UFC London. I'm going to be previewing this weekend's card, and I'm going to give you my predictions as well. I don't want to beat around the bush and waste your time. I'm just going to jump straight into this. I'm going to try and fire through these prelims pretty quickly. First up, we've got Hannibal Claudio Silva. He's taking on Nicholas Dalby. Silva was meant to be on the card last time against Gunnar Nelson. Of course, he pulled out of that one, but he's finally got his London date. He's taking on Dynamite, the Danish Dynamite, Nicholas Dalby. I think for Claudio Silva, the biggest question or the biggest issue is always going to be that gas tank. For me, it's kind of like a first round sub or bust for him. I think he might have a good first round. He might take down Dalby and do some decent work, but I think in the end, Nicholas Dalby's probably just going to be able to survive in that first round. And Silva's probably going to fade as the fight goes on. So I'm going to take Dalby here. Not that he's anything special. He's just a solid, well-rounded vet. He's picked up some decent wins over his last few fights. He beat D-Rod and I think Cowboy Oliveira as well. So, Dalby's a good fighter. I think he's going to get the job done. Next up then, we got Mandy Boom, or Boom, I don't know. I think it's Boom because of the accent. You can't see it there, it's not on screen. But she's taking on Victoria Leonardo. And for Mandy Boom in her last fight against Ariana Lipski, it's a bit of a difficult fight, I think, to come into the UFC. But to be fair, she was coming in undefeated, 7-0, as a decent prospect. She loses that one. I think it's clear to see that the path to victory is to take her down. Victoria Leonardo, I think, excels in the grappling exchanges. She's obviously not had the easiest of starts to her UFC career. Took out a good opponent in Chelsea Hackett coming into the UFC. I think Chelsea was a bit green in that one. I don't know how this one goes. I think, but I do think Leonardo can keep it competitive on the feet. And I think that, Mandy Boom, her takedown defense just hasn't looked up to speed for me. I think Leonardo's going to be able to get her down and grind out a decision, or maybe even get a finish. Who knows? Jai Herbert then versus Kyle Nelson, and for Jai Herbert, it's been a really difficult beginning to his UFC career when you look at the fighters that he's had to face already. I mean, talk about a murderer's row. Francisco Trinaldo, he's fought Ilya Tapiria. There's another guy who I just can't remember off the top of my head that he's also fought. That's a bit of a savage. For Kyle Nelson, he's a decent fighter. Coming out of Canada. I think the game plan for him is going to be wrestling. I think he's going to try and take down Jai Herbert, and I think the biggest issue again for me here is going to be gas tank. Can he keep up the pace that he's going to set early on? I'm not entirely convinced. So I think Kyle Nelson might win the first round, might get a takedown, might do some damage on the mat, but I think kind of going into the second round, I think he's going to slow down a bit, and I think the Black Country Banger is going to pick up his pace, and I think he's going to get a finish, to be honest, on the feet. I'm picking Jai Herbert to get himself a win. All right, next up, we've got Mohamed Mokaev. He's taking on Charles Johnson, the LFA veteran. Honestly, I'm really shocked that it's taken this long for Charles Johnson to finally get to the UFC, because he's such a good fighter. You look at his record, he's beaten the likes of Carlos Mokaev most recently. I think he's beaten Yuma Horiuchi as well, who's a good fighter. He lost to Brandon Royval, which is, there's no shame in that one. So that's how good this guy is. I'm really surprised, and especially when you see the likes, or just the kind of relationship that LFA and the UFC have got. It does seem to be a bit of a feeder organisation right now, with there's the odd exception, the Rafi and Stotts, who, of course, got to Contender Series and missed the chance. The UFC missed the chance to sign him, and obviously now he's flourishing in Bellator. Anyway, I digress. He's taking on Mohamed Mokaev, and I think that speaks volumes to Mokaev. I think fighters are avoiding him like the plague, especially considering, he's only going to be getting offered unranked fighters. I think Charles Johnson is a very good fighter, but I do think that Mohamed Mokaev is a seriously special, talented guy. And he's putting it all together now. We've seen that in the Cody Durden fight, made swift work of him. I'm not sure if it's going to be the same here. I think it might be a bit more of a difficult fight for him this time round against Charles Johnson. I think he's got more experience. I think he's probably more well-rounded as well. I don't want people to look at Charles Johnson and think, there's no UFC experience there, therefore you completely write him off here. I don't think you can, but I think Mokaev is going to probably stroll to a relatively easy 30-27 decision in this one. Next up, Makwan, Amirkhani, and Jonathan Pierce, GSP. I like Jonathan Pierce. He's a decent fighter. I do have some worries though about him defensively when it comes to the on the mat. I think he's in quite a few of his fights now, he's been put in very dangerous positions on the mat and either finished or almost finished. And I think against a guy like Makwan Amirkhani, who, his jiu-jitsu is sneakily underrated. We've seen that in the Mike Grundy fight. I think as well that the gas tank is probably the thing that's going to hinder Amirkhani the most in this one. I think there's always been questions about it, but we know that he's funky and creative, and he's going to look for wild strikes and look for wild submissions. I think that's how he wins this fight. If he does that in the first round, if he can, wind up on top, or even if he gets taken down off his back, I think Makwan Amirkhani is a threat. And to be honest with you, I think that's how it's going to go. I think I could see Jonathan Pearce taking down Amirkhani and getting caught in an armbar or getting caught in something. I think he's going to come in with a wrestling game plan in this one. If it gets out of the first round and we start, goes to the second round, goes to the third round, I do like Jonathan Pearce to kind of gradually take over this fight, and I think it might end up being a really close decision. But yeah, I'm going to not lump literally in terms of put a lot of money on, but I'm going to guess that Makwan Amirkhani can pull off something spectacular in the first round, just as he done against Mike Grundy in his last one. Nathaniel Wood versus Charles Hossa. Nathaniel Wood finally getting that London hometown show in the UFC, or at least he's scheduled to. I guess this time last week, or this time in the week last time, I should say. He also was still scheduled to, but it never happened. Hopefully it does for him this time, though. He's taking on Charles Hossa, who is just a tough, gritty veteran in this division. He's not an easy fight. I think he's always going to be that guy who's going to win some, lose some. I think his longevity in the UFC speaks for itself. You look at his record and you think, oh, well, he loses 33% of his fights. It's not like that. But I do like Nathaniel Wood in this one. Obviously, as well, it's his first fight of 45-2, which I think is interesting. But yeah, I'm going with the prospect here. I think he's got a massive advantage in the stand-up areas of this fight. And I think Charles Hossa's best shot at winning this is typically how he always does, and that's kind of throwing out a submission, when he's on bottom. I think Nathaniel Wood's grappling is decent enough to avoid being submitted. I wouldn't count out Charles Hossa by any means, but I don't think the game plan's going to be for Nathaniel Wood to take down Charles Hossa here. But I think he can if he needs to. I think it's going to be on the feet. I think Nathaniel Wood's going to put on a clinic. Whether he finishes him or not, I don't know. I'm going to say a decision. I think a 30-27 decision, but a finish here really wouldn't surprise me at all for Nathaniel Wood. I just think that he's pretty much better everywhere in this one. I think being up a weight class, we'll see how he does. But yeah, interesting fight. Hopefully it actually happens for Nathaniel. All right, then next up we have got Marc Diakeise, the Bone Crusher. He's taking on Damir Hasdovich, the Bosnian bomber. And I'm going to take Marc Diakeise in this one. I just don't think Damir Hasdovich's takedown defense is anywhere near good enough to the level where it's going to be. He's an okay fighter. He's nothing special. But of his last few fights, I think his only one is against Yancy Medeiros, and that came a year ago. I won against Yancy Medeiros in 2021. Doesn't say all that much to me. Marc Diakeise, though, I know when he came into the UFC, he was a really flashy striker with a lot of technique, and obviously he's still got that. But we're seeing him now start to... I know he's picked up a couple of losses in his last few fights, but, losing to Rafael Fiziev. Come on, right? Look at what he just done to RDA. But yeah, I think we're seeing now that he's rounding out his game and he can grapple. And, we've seen before now that he'll take you down if he needs to, and he'll win fights that way. And I think with Damir Hasdovich's takedown defense, I just have no confidence in him being able to stop those takedowns. I think even on the feet, Marc Diakeise... I think it's a pretty competitive fight on the feet. I think the X factor here is the takedown from Marc Diakeise. So, I'm going to take Diakeise in this one to get the job done. And then finally, rounding out the prelims, a bit of a late addition to this card, at least for the Dragon, Mason Jones. But he is here on the London card, taking on Ludwig Klein, the Slovakian. And yeah, I've got the Dragon. I've got Mason Jones in this one. I remember when Ludwig Klein made his UFC debut against Shane Young, and he looked incredible. His striking was so good, and I remember thinking, "Whoa, Ludwig Klein is something special." A really entertaining fighter. And then he fights Mike Trezano, he fights Nate Landwehr, and doesn't look all that. And then it was a really fun fight against Devontae Smith. In his last one, he got the nod there, split decision. His takedown defense was on point that night. I think Mason Jones is better everywhere, though. I'm not going to lie. I'm taking the Welsh Dragon. I'm taking Mason Jones. to get this fight, even on short notice, yeah, I've got Mason Jones. Okay, then moving on to the fight that I am most excited for on this card for obvious reasons. We've got Paul the Bear Jew Craig taking on Volkan Oezdemir. And this is a very interesting matchup. I said it last time when I was talking about Paul Craig and Nikita Krylov, that Paul Craig plays a dangerous game. He's going to get punched and punched and punched until he gets that little window of opportunity. And Paul Craig's jiu-jitsu, his grappling in general, is just that good. That's all he needs to finish fights. And I think people are kind of saying, guys are throwing themselves into his guard. They're kind of asking for it. But at what point do you start to go, well, you know what, Paul Craig is just really, really, really good at this and he's making this happen. I think he is. And I think that's why this is happening. And I said last time as well about Nikita Krylov. I said Nikita Krylov, if he was clever enough, he'd be able to keep this fight on the feet. That he was good enough to keep this fight on the feet and he was good enough to win it on the feet. And I still stand by that. If they were to fight again, we'll talk about him later in a bit, but if he was to fight again, and I truly believe that could happen, but he wasn't good enough and he wasn't clever enough to stay out of Paul Craig's guard. And you don't want to be there. But yeah, at this point in his career, as Volkan Oezdemir, when you look at his last few fights that he lost, losing to Anthony Smith after the DC fight, Anthony Smith has proven he's a top 5 guy in this division. Dominic Reyes was the bomb at one point. Beat Alexander Rakic via split decision. It might have been somewhat controversial, might have been a split decision in a close fight, but he still beat Alexander Rakic. Loses to Yuri Prochazka, loses to Magomed Ankalaev. So it's not like Volkan Oezdemir is losing to scrubs. Quite the contrary, right? He's losing to top 5 guys. He's losing to guys who've gone on to win the belt, losing to guys who, Magomed Ankalaev in his last one, who's probably going to challenge for the belt at one point. He's losing to like the best guys in the division. I think his takedown defense is pretty decent. I think it's pretty good. I think it's all right. His stand-up as well. He's a powerful guy. His boxing's not too bad. Is he good enough to defend the takedown from Paul Craig? I think obviously if he's clever, he's going to try and avoid falling into the trap of jumping into Paul Craig's guard. But as we've kind of said, I think it's just a talent and a knack that Paul Craig's got for getting guys to drop into his guard. Whether that's through playing possum, whether it's him dragging them down there. Once he drags you down there, you're in a difficult spot. Is Volkan Oezdemir gonna maybe hit Paul Craig with a big shot, and Paul Craig's gonna fall down and get on his arse, and is Volkan gonna jump in and spill blood a little and end up getting caught in a trap? Paul Craig's takedowns themselves are very unconventional. He's not like a standard wrestler or whatever. He's got weird ways of getting you down there, but I think he's proven that whether it's on bottom or whether he's on top, he's a serious submission threat. I'm going to side with Paul Craig. I like Volkan Oezdemir, his chances in this fight. I think if he plays it clever enough, if his takedown defense holds up, then he should win this. But I think I say this about most people Paul Craig fights, and as we get deeper and deeper into the division, I think I'm only going to say that more often. But I think Paul Craig, his takedowns are unorthodox. I think he's going to sneak one in there. And I think he's going to win because it might go like a round or two. I could see him maybe losing the first round and it going into the second. But I think at some point in this fight, Paul Craig's going to get him down there. And I think if he gets him down there, at this point, it's hard for me to bet against him, against anyone in that position in the whole division. So I'm taking Paul Craig. I'm going to say second round submission. I think he gets it done. And hopefully, main event in Glasgow. Title eliminator, that's what I want to see. So book it, UFC. White. Okay, next up, we've got the meatball. Molly McCann taking on 24K Goldie, Hannah Goldie. And I'm taking Molly McCann in this one. I like her pressure a lot in this. I think, she's going to be in Goldie's face a lot. I think she's going to mix in the takedowns. Again, we're kind of seeing this now with Molly McCann. She's rounding out her game. She's capable of mixing it up and taking the fight to the ground when she needs to. And I think that's probably going to be the difference in this one. I think Hannah Goldie's, she's got good volume about her. That's kind of really I don't see all too much. And, she got a nice submission win in her last one. I think it was against Emily Whitmire. She got an armbar. But in general, I do favour Molly McCann in this matchup. I don't think she's anywhere near as good as the odds are claiming. She's nowhere near should be this big a favourite. But as what it is, I do think she is the favourite. And I do think she's going to get the job done. I can see her winning a 30-27 decision, maybe a 29-28. Just pushing forward, piling on the pressure, and landing the bigger, more impactful shots and mixing the takedowns. Right, next up we got the minor, Nikita Krylov. He's taking on Alexander Gustafsson, the Mauler. He's back. Last time out, I think he fought Fabricio Verdum and lost that one. At this point, my question for Alexander Gustafsson is why are you fighting? What are you trying to prove? Like, why are you back? Obviously took a lot of time out. He moved up to heavyweight. He's back at 205 now. At this point in his career, he's been there. He's been around the block, hasn't he? Really, he's kind of been there, done that. It's been a long time. It's been almost a decade since he fought John Jones that very first time. Since those Glover Teixeira wins, or the Glover Teixeira win rather. But those kind of wins, when he was lining up people and looking like an absolute machine. At this point, really, with Alexander Gustafsson, I don't really know what's left in the tank because, in his last few fights, he put on a good fight with Anthony Smith, but ends up getting finished in that one. Fabricio Verdum dragged him into deep waters there, and that was a tough fight as well for both guys. But Verdum drags him into deep waters and gets the finish. Against a guy like Nikita Krylov, I think on the feet this could be fun. I think it could be competitive. I do think Nikita Krylov though has got an advantage in the grappling, and if Nikita Krylov decides to wrestle with Gus, if he decides to take him down, and if he ends up in a position where he's on top of him, I can see him finishing Alexander Gustafsson. I'm not going to lie. I think he's probably heavier handed. I just haven't seen anything from Gus in so long for me to actually have any confidence in him, and for me to actually look at Alexander Gustafsson and think, okay, yeah, I can see you winning this fight because you showed me this recently. Not seen anything recently from Alexander Gustafsson, so I don't have any confidence in him. I like Nikita Krylov in this one. I'm going to take the minor. If we get vintage Gus, then on the feet he can put on a boxing clinic. Nice uppercuts and things like that with those shots that he knocked out Glover Teixeira with. But I'm taking Krylov. I think he's more well-rounded. I really like his activity a lot more. I'm going to take Nikita Krylov. Okay, this is the one everyone's been waiting for. Paddy the Baddie, Paddy Pimblett, and the Monkey King, Jordan Leavitt. I quite like Jordan Leavitt. He's a good fighter. He's been on a nice roll as of late. I'm taking Paddy Pimblett though. And don't get me wrong, I think this has got the potential to be pretty competitive. I think Leavitt's probably going to come out with a wrestling heavy game plan. He's going to try and take Paddy down. Maybe like, Nathaniel Hermansson or Soran back. Obviously a couple of losses that he's had in his career. Very good fighters, of course. Prolific wrestlers. I think Jordan Leavitt's going to come out with a similar sort of game plan as to those two. I don't think he's as strong as those guys physically. I don't think he's as good in general as those guys, to be honest. But in terms of the wrestling department, I think he's going to struggle a little bit to kind of hold Paddy down. And if he does get him down, it's one of those things where Paddy Pimblett's submission game, I don't always love fighters sitting off their back fishing for submissions, but I think Paddy Pimblett's good enough. If that in the event that he's taken down, he can throw up something. He can catch a neck or catch a flailing limb or something. But to be honest with you, I think this fight is going to take. Obviously, it's going to start on the feet, and I think Paddy's going to come out explosively on the feet. Pressure Leavitt back, and I think he's going to catch him with something. Maybe he'll drop him and then goes to the ground and submits him or something. I'm predicting a finish either way. I think it's going to be with the hands. I think he's going to drop him. And then he'll probably finish him on the mat. I'm going to take Paddy Pimblett to win this one. Not like super confident, but I do think this is a matchup where you look at a guy like Jordan Leavitt, you think he's on a nice roll, he's got a nice record. Maybe you think some people will then think it's a little step up in competition, and I guess it kind of is from Kazula Vargas. But yeah, I'm taking Paddy Pimblett. I think he's going to get the job done. Very curious to see who he fights in his next fight because he's got an improved contract, which means that the money hopefully shouldn't be an issue for him, and we can start to see him now. If he goes 3-0 in the UFC, talking what he's talking like he's talking and finishing fights, then it's about time we see him against someone, someone real, someone legit. Okay, then co-main event time. We have got the action man, Chris Curtis. He's filling in for Darren Till on short notice against Jack the Joker Hermansson. Speedy recoveries to Darren because we want to see Darren in the cage. Hermansson's been at the top now for a while. I say at the top. He's been in the top 10 for a while now. Came into the UFC and very quickly after a few fights started fighting really good fighters. Thiago Santos and Talis Leites, David Branch, who was thought of as he was pretty well thought of at one point. Although he, didn't last too long when he came back from a World Series of fighting. Yeah, and then he fought Jacare Souza. That was his best win. He looked fantastic that night when he beat Jacare. But we've not really seen it since. He's lost to Cannonier. I think he beat Kelvin Gastelum with that heel hook. That was an entertaining fight for as long as it lasted. Then he's lost to Vittori, beat Shabazian, and then just lost to Sean Strickland. Hermansson to me feels like a fighter he feels like one of the fighters that's aged visibly, and I hate saying that because he's not like super old and obviously still won a couple of fights, but I don't know what level he's at anymore. It's one of those ones. Can he hang with the top 5 guys in the weight class? And can the action man Chris Curtis? I guess we're going to find out now. There's no going back at this point. If you beat a guy like Jack Hermansson, at least for a while, you're there or thereabouts. He's on a fantastic streak. Brendan Allen, obviously, before that Adolfo Vieira fight, a couple of great fighters. The Duplessis fight never happened, unfortunately for him. That'd be an absolute banger. But yeah, I like his takedown defense a lot. Jack Hermansson's probably going to try and get this on the ground and grapple. Did he stuff like 20 takedowns or something in his last fight with Adolfo Vieira or something mad like that? It's not like he took a ton of damage. It's a pretty quick turnaround. It's like a month later, 4 weeks, 5 weeks later. It's not like he took a ton of damage in that one either. He's still going to be relatively healthy. Shouldn't hopefully not be too much wear and tear on his body. Coming out of this one against Hermansson, big time opportunity for him, big time fight for him. I think Chris Curtis is going to get it done. I like his takedown defense loads. That Adolfo Vieira fight just fills me with confidence. I think he's the heavier hitter. I think he's the more creative striker. I'm going to say a decision. I think Hermansson might get a takedown or two, might threaten with submissions, might win a round, maybe even a split decision. I think Chris Curtis, though, over the course of the 3 rounds, is going to land the bigger shots, the more impactful shots. He's going to be able to keep it on the feet for long enough and do his thing. I'm going to take Chris Curtis to win this fight via decision. Right, okay, and main event time. I know I said earlier on that Paul Craig versus Volkan Oezdemir was the fight I'm most excited for on the card, but this might tie for first place. I am buzzing for Curtis Razor Blaydes and Tom Aspinall because I believe in Tommy Aspinall. I think he's a real deal. I think he is future championship material. I really do. Whether he wins it or not, that remains to be seen, but I think he's good enough anyway. I also think Curtis Blaydes is good enough to be UFC champion, despite the roadblocks. He's lost to Ngannou twice, he's lost to Derek Lewis. Other than that, though, he's beaten everybody because his wrestling is, especially without like DC in the division, it's the best in the division, and it's such a difficult, hard, and unique puzzle for Tom Aspinall to solve. We seen in the last fight against Alexander Volkov that, Tom Aspinall, we know he's got the BJJ, he's a black belt. His dad, I think, introduced him to BJJ. I think that was the first martial arts kind of experience that he's got. We've seen it a couple of times before in Cage Warriors and, in the UFC. So we know that Tom Aspinall can grapple. We know he's got the jiu-jitsu about him, but the wrestling is going to be the big question. First of all, can he stop the takedown? I don't think so. But to be fair, I don't think there's anyone in the heavyweight division right now that can stop Curtis Blaydes taking him down. And that's not a knock on Tom Aspinall. It's just Curtis Blaydes is that damn good, and he's such a big guy. He's weighing in at the limit. He's huge. Tom Aspinall will be the lighter guy, I think, in this matchup. So I think Curtis Blaydes is definitely going to get him on his back at points in this fight. Unless, like in the Derek Lewis fight, it was a very lazy shot from Curtis Blaydes. It was quite a wide and a bit of a lazy, slow shot. Very easy to telegraph. And Derek Lewis landed that uppercut, got it on the money. I think he was hoping, probably drilling that in practice. Tom Aspinall might do the same thing. But I'm going to assume Curtis Blaydes is on a day game and isn't going to be sloppy and make that kind of mistake again. I like Tom Aspinall striking. He's going to move around and try and be elusive. Probably, pick him off from the outside. I'm not expecting Tom Aspinall to come out here and blitz him and get a first round finish or anything like that at all. I'd be surprised. I guess there is always an interesting factor as to maybe whether Tom Aspinall takes down Curtis Blaydes, which I actually think he might do, which seems a bit bizarre. I could see Tom Aspinall doing that, putting Blaydes on his back, using the jiu-jitsu, maybe try to work for another submission victory. Genuinely, I think that might be his best path to victory, which might seem a bit bizarre, why would Tom Aspinall come out and take down Curtis Blaydes, but I can see it. And I think Tom Aspinall's a very intelligent guy, he's a very intelligent fighter. I think he might also understand that might be his best path to victory. So genuinely, I think that's not out with the realms of possibility. I really don't. When Aspinall does get put on his back, I say when, not if, because I think it's pretty likely. What the get-up's going to be like. He's going to be throwing things off from his back, try to grab an arm, maybe, go for a Kimura, maybe just use submissions to get back to his feet. Again, as I said, he's a good grappler, and I think he's a very intelligent fighter too. So, Tom Aspinall, he's also been in that spot now. He's handled the pressure of being in the O2. For your first fight in the UFC, to be not just in front of fans, but be in front of a sold-out O2 arena in England when you're from England, is a real big deal. And it's not just that, you're the main event. That's a lot to soak in, to soak up rather. And I think Tom Aspinall now, he's been there, he's done that, he's lived it. Second time round, hopefully be a bit easier for him in terms of handling that sort of pressure. But for people who maybe, aren't as clued up on the UFC, these cards are attracted fans from the UK who maybe aren't super, intertwined in, the divisional standings and, fighters in general. Curtis Blaydes is a big step up from Alexander Volkov. I really do believe that. And I really want Tom Aspinall to win. I'm a big Tom Aspinall fan, but I'm going to go with Curtis Blaydes. I just think the wrestling is going to be too hard to stop. And I think Curtis Blaydes is going to do enough in this fight to win. I'll say a decision. I'll say maybe Tom Aspinall gets a round, maybe a 49-46 decision. But yeah, I've picked every single UK fighter on the card until Tom Aspinall. But I'm going to go with Curtis Blaydes. Although I'm not writing off Tom Aspinall by any means, and I hope he does it. So there you have it. That is my picks for UFC London. Please let me know in the comments who you're taking. I want to hear every single pick. You can tweet me at Jack Buchanan MMA. It's on screen if you're watching. You can follow Broken Orbital on Twitter at BrokenOrbital_, and on Instagram and TikTok at Broken Orbital MMA. You can catch the podcast on YouTube in video format, or on Google Podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, or on Spotify in audio format. I will see you next week for a recap of this card. We've also got Bellator out tomorrow. I'm not going to be posting a video on Bellator or Cage Warriors, but I will be tweeting over on Broken Orbital _. So go and follow me there, and you can see who I'm taking on those cards. But thank you so much for tuning in and listening, and I will see you next week with a recap of this card. Goodbye.